Welcome to Finance 300. This is your online instructor. I'm Diana Block, and I'm very excited to work with all of you this quarter. And I want to point out a few things related to the class before we actually get into the course material. And what I have in front of you is my Blackboard IM. This is an instant messaging tool that is provided by the school for us. And to get this, you go to the Tools menu inside the class and then just download it. And what it allows us to do is talk instantly. It's just like any other instant messaging application. You might use Link at work or Yahoo Messenger or even Facebook Messenger or something like that. And this allows us to stay connected, me and you, as teacher and student, so that we can see when each other is online. And anytime I'm online, you can talk to me, chat with me, ask questions about the assignments or requirements for the course. And that way I can also see who in my class is online if there was something I wanted to share. I think it's a very easy tool. You can look in my office hours inside the instructor area of the course to see when I will always definitely be online each week. Also, anytime that you see me with this green dot next to my name, that means I'm online at that time. So even if it isn't office hours, you can still contact me through IM and talk. You can always contact me through email as well. I do answer emails very quickly since I'm online most of the day and I'm always on my computer. But the instant messenger is just an additional tool. If you have a question right then and I happen to be online, then we can talk about it and resolve it. So let's look at also some of the material related to the course. Let's get on the same page as far as some of the topics that we need to discuss for finance. Some of you have had accounting before. Some of you may have had a finance class before, personal finance. You may have some work experience related to financial topics. So we're all coming from different backgrounds. So for a few minutes, I want to get us on the same page regarding a few concepts so that we're up to speed and talking about the same things. As you read through your reading assignment for this week one, it's going to introduce you to quite a few concepts, which for some of you, like I said, might be a review depending on what classes you've had before, and for some of you it might even be new. Most of us are probably familiar with the term assets, and assets are property that's owned by the company, or it could be our personal assets, but we're in this class focusing on corporations. So things that the corporation owns that have some value are assets. And we can subdivide assets into real assets and financial assets, and that just gives us additional categories of assets. Real assets are physical, tangible items that we own that have value. So we're talking about delivery trucks, factories, equipment, inventory, physical things that you can pick up and sell to somebody. Transferring it from hand to hand is a real asset, things you can touch. Now we also have financial assets. If we personally have a $20 bill in our pocket, physically it's a piece of paper, but there's a contractual claim behind it that's going to give us $20 worth of value, and that's what makes the bill in our pocket valuable to us, makes it an asset, is the contractual claim behind it. So if we have some ownership stock in a company, that ownership stock is just a transaction on the computer or a stock certificate. The value is in the fact that there's a contractual claim behind it that entitles us to some of the profits of the firm. If we purchase a bond, the bond certificate has its actual value because that means that firm owes us money. So those are financial assets because they're intangible assets, and the value is not derived from the physical form of it. The value is derived from the contractual claim that goes along with it. So any corporation is probably going to have a combination of these types of assets. They're going to have some real assets, some plant, some equipment, some factories, some inventory. They're also going to have some financial assets. So let's talk about security prices. How are the security prices determined? Generally, when we talk about the price or the value of a security, we're going to estimate the expected cash flows that we expect to receive from that asset, and we're going to discount those cash flows down to today's dollars, which gives us the present value, and that is what we consider usually the value of a security, is the present value of any cash flows we expect to receive from it. The other thing we have to consider, though, when we look at the present value of cash flows is how likely are we to actually receive those cash flows. And so we're talking about the concept of risk. That's great if the firm owes us $50, but if the firm is bankrupt and can't pay the 50, then that value is not as assured that it's going to be worth $50 to us. If they go bankrupt, we only get 10 cents on the dollar of what they owe us. So there's that aspect of risk, where the present value is the value of any future cash flows discounted to the present, but then the risk factor is how likely are we to actually receive those cash flows. So when we start talking about values of securities and security prices, those are some of the things that we want to consider. The future cash flows, but then also the risk. We want to look at both of those or think about both of those when we're pricing securities or researching the price of a security. You're going to also read through this information related to this in the first chapter of the textbook. So by no means do I want you to use this video to replace reading the information in the textbook. These are just some things that as you go through the reading, I'd like you to pay special attention to as you're going through the reading. Things like assets, financial assets, present value, cash flows, and risk. So I've got some other topics here that I also want to discuss with you. Let me find my next slide. That's also part of the introduction to finance and the very beginning basic information that we want to go over before we move into more complicated topics. Let's look at the actual subject of finance. Some of you, like I said, have taken finance accounting classes, accounting classes, and economics. So you may wonder, what's the real difference here? What is finance versus accounting? When we look at finance, we're looking at the future. What should we do? How should we spend the funds that we have? What projects will give us the best returns? How should we balance our investments? What should we do in the future? Whereas in accounting, it's more of a historical focus. We're looking back at what has happened over the last few periods and making sure that's accurately recorded so we can determine what is the health of our firm based on what has happened already. So with finance versus accounting, you may look at future focus versus historical focus, or cash flow focus versus evaluating the overall health of the firm. They really are two different topics. Now, when you talk about finance versus economics, economics is a social science and it studies the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So finance is actually more similar to economics because what we do is we take economic concepts and apply it to financial markets and business problems. When we apply economic concepts to finance and business problems, then we are in the field of finance. So finance kind of grows out of economics. It's one part of the study of economics. And when we take economic concepts about supply and demand and consumption of goods and use that information and those theories to study the financial markets and actual business problems. So that's how those three subjects kind of tie with each other. Finance and accounting, looking back versus looking forward. Finance and economics is a subset of economics that applies economic concepts to the financial markets and to specific business problems. So even though you may have had some of those other classes, this information is going to have a different spin, although a lot of the terminology is going to cross over between these two topics or these three topics. You're going to see some crossover of basic concepts, but you're going to apply them in different ways based on what you're studying in that particular class. So let's look at the ownership of a corporation. When we look at the types of ownership, you've got a proprietorship or the corporate form. In this class, we're going to focus on the corporate form. In a proprietorship, you might have a single proprietorship or you might have a partnership. This type of business is easy to start. There's no double taxation. Those are the main benefits of it. In the corporate form, it does require a legal process to start it, but it's easier to raise funds and there's limited liability to the owners. So that's considered the benefit to the corporate form, is that the owners of the firm won't be personally sued for the debts of the corporation. They are not fully liable, all the owners, for the actions and the debts of the firm. They may lose their investment, but that's the maximum liability the owners will have, is they will lose what they've invested. But if the firm gets sued for millions and millions of dollars for malpractice, the owners aren't being sued, just the firm itself. Whereas in a proprietorship and the firm is sued, the owners themselves are personally being sued. So as you're reading through that information in this week's study in the chapter, make sure you're aware that in this course we are going to focus on the corporate form. And so there's a unique set of problems that relate to having a corporation, unique requirements that are different from a proprietorship. In the corporate form, for example, you have this agency problem. Because the directors and managers and vice presidents and the people who run the firm are not necessarily the owners of the firm, they're just agents of the firm. They're not owners, they're just agents. You may have a problem where there's a conflict of interest of what the owners want versus what the management wants. So you're going to read about the agency problem, but that arises only in the corporate form because the managers of the firm are not the owners. They are, however, stakeholders. So when we talk about the term of stakeholders, that may include the actual stockholders, the employees, the customers, the community, everyone who has a stake in what happens in that firm. Stockholders own the firm, but they aren't really the only people who are concerned about how that business is run and what kind of corporate citizen it is. So keep in mind when we're talking about stockholders, we're saying those people who own the firm. Those are the stockholders. Stakeholders includes a wide variety of people, including employees of the firm, managers of the firm, people who live in the community where the company is located, even the customers of the firm would all be considered stakeholders. And the stockholders, of course, are stakeholders as well. They certainly have a vested interest in the performance of the firm. So want to just clear up that terminology as well, what a stakeholder is versus a stockholder. And I think that this will wrap us up pretty much for week one. We've introduced some terminology that I want you to be aware of as you go through the reading. And we'll continue this discussion of financial topics as we go along through the course, and we'll touch on each of these some more. If you have any questions or you want to discuss any of these items further, make sure you contact me on Blackboard IM, or feel free to send me an email anytime and we can talk further. I look forward to meeting you in the discussion area and talking with you more there as well. So I'm going to sign off and I wish you a great week one.